Yeah, so really for us, the big lesson for me is that I'm not an expert, and I certainly strive to be one, especially because it's my home. We're paying for it. And when I realized that no one really is, a lot of even the experts, I think, at the end of the day, everyone's a human being. Everyone, there's no real truth. There's just interpretation, right? Everyone interprets what they feel is the right way to go. And at the end of the day, you just trust. And I think for us, we had to trust in our architect, who actually served as our sort of GC, even though he wasn't officially a GC. So I think that was the first thing. And when I say you're not the expert, I mean that there's only so much homework I can do. There's only so much homework. And I researched and read, I've got 16,000 yellow stickies of notes, but that really still didn't answer everything, because I can't use a yellow sticky note to open up the wall to tell me what's in there already. I have to rely and trust upon the people that I'm paying to do this for us. I think the second thing for us, if we could do it all over again, the next time we remodel our house, complete from top to bottom, is we would definitely urge anyone that's looking to do this to insist upon complete clarity on the trade-offs between cost and what you want, so that if we had decided we wanted to squeeze out every ounce of sustainability or every ounce of thermal efficiency, what would that cost us to take off the bricks? There's the embodied energy in the brick itself, well, there's the labor cost, there's all the cost of taking off, the bricks on the outside to insulate behind the existing masonry. That was a big thing for us. We got an offer, or we got a proposal to basically expand the footprint of the house by basically digging another foundation so that you could do that. Well, that sort of conflicted with our other part of our philosophy as far as the soil. So we didn't want to disturb the soil. We wanted to reduce the amount of soil disturbance as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we did what we did, and why we went straight up versus go out. And so I think that's the big thing, is looking at the cost. But the reality here is that before the work starts, you're only going to get general costs. You cannot get a specific breakdown, like how many nuts and bolts am I going to need? How many sheets of rigid foam insulation do we need to purchase? It's really impossible to get to that until you really know what you're really dealing with. So you sort of have to be willing to accept some unknowns. I think that's part of our lesson, is the willingness to operate in sort of that unknown area. I think the other thing for our particular situation is, in selecting our architect as our GC, we needed to really fully understand what that relationship was. So what we eventually learned during the course of the project is that we signed contracts directly with each contractor. So it was not the typical GC situation where the GC signs the contract or subs it out to everyone. We were directly actually responsible for paying them, but where we sort of misunderstood this relationship is that we weren't really overseeing their work. And we thought that a lot of that was happening. We found out that in several instances where a lot of the work that was being done wasn't really being supervised as closely as we would like it. And that's what led us to the last little bullet point, is be prepared for unexpected surprises. So we hit asbestos in our basement tile. We had a plan to cover it with the floating floor and not touch it. But humans being humans, we had a communication gap, and we came to the house one day and jackhammering was going on in the tile. So they had jackhammered it up. That was right whenever the serve had just been installed. So we had just released asbestos into this new home that had this optimally working serve, circulating the air through the house, circulating asbestos fibers to the house in the most optimal fashion imaginable. So, so we had some situations that needed to be addressed. So we addressed the situations, but I think the lesson learned for us is really about communication. It's really about it's really about trust, trust but verify. I think that's what we've really learned. And I guess I wanted to add that one of the other things that we did is, in seeking the LEED certification, is there's that charrette that you conduct at the beginning of the process. And that's where we did have all of the different expert contractors that we had brought onto the project meet at our house. We conducted it at our house so that we could have one where everyone was reading off the same script. Everyone understood what their role was. And so we actually employed Echo Achievers here in Chicago to provide that third party, green building expertise for us to kind of coordinate the whole thing. And I think that's really what's really helped, is so that it helps us understand that when you do a home like this, you have to take a very holistic approach. You have to know that, yes, the windows, I saw something in the chat, someone mentioned the windows, that absolutely the windows contribute to the thermal envelope sufficiency, all the materials that you choose, all of that. So that's really what we learned in it, is just to be open to unexpected changes.
Trust and verify.
Trust and verify. Trust and verify.
Trust and verify.
That'd be the one big takeaway.
Thanks, Amy and Mike. And just so you know, thanks for the shout out to Eco Achievers. Their president, Lindsay Elton, is actually in Detroit area now. Don't worry, they still have staff there to help you in Chicago.
Yeah.
But
I texted Emily today.
Good.
Today.
But if you guys are looking for a fantastic energy rater here, I'm glad you mentioned them, because she's over here in Detroit now. But Bart, I know you have to get going, so I want to be respectful of your time, and I'd like to jump ahead for you to kind of give us a wrap up real quick, so you can head out. So I'm going to pass it off to you right now, if you're still there listening or didn't take a break.
I'm still here. This slide was started kind of as somehow as a joke, but there might be some truth to it. It's a little bit the outsider looking in, maybe. So I lived for 32 years in the Netherlands, and there's some interesting differences. The homes are totally different. Most of them are stone, and it's actually pretty hard to change anything in those homes, because you have to go through stone walls, etc. But I think another interesting thing is, over there you buy a home and you intend to stay there the rest of your life. It's somewhat stereotyping here, but in the US, if you look at the statistics, on average, people move every 5 years. And I think, as we are sitting here, nobody did this all going net zero and with the plan of moving within 3, 4, or 5 years. So it raises an interesting question to me. How can you scale this up in a landscape where a lot of people are really moving around and see a home as a temporary roof over their heads? Are they going the mile that we are going? So that raises that question. But on the other side, what I really appreciate here is the flexibility. I mean, I need to change something in my home. I don't have to go through a stone wall. It's easy, it's flexible, it's cheaper. And the emphasis in the States on comfort really is very attractive too. And sometimes the Dutch are a little bit, don't say that I told you this today, but they can be a little Germanic and overdo things and lose sight of comfort. And it's a little joke. They build a home that should survive a tank attack, torrential floods, a nuclear explosion. But it kind of tells you, like, okay, you can also overdo things and then lose sight of what's really important. So to me, it's a little bit outside looking in, but maybe there's a lesson in here. How can we also, because when I'm talking to friends or neighbors, and the solar panels are always a good starter for a conversation. And somewhere somebody's going to ask me, so what did this all cost? And how do you not lose them in that conversation? So that's basically what I try to do with this slide.
Well, Bart, I know you, like you said, I know you got to get going here. So I really appreciate you joining us. If I send out your contact information or info on your project after the session, is that okay?
Sure, there is a slide in here with my contact and also my contractor, so for sure.
Yeah, I'll do that. But good to virtually meet you out there, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. Nice meeting you. Good luck.
All right, Josh, I'll pass it back to you. Are you, Josh, Dale, Aim, are you guys all right sticking around and continuing? I'll try to jump into Q&A right after this, if that's all right.
No problem here.
Good.
Yeah, so to bring us back, Amy and Mike, I do have to contradict you just a little bit, because I can't stand the statement trust but verify, because if I have to verify, that by default means I don't trust. So I've coined it a little differently. Don't trust, verify. But I'm picking up on what you mean. You really mean the same thing. Have some trust, but also do your homework, go the extra mile and verify a little bit. But I say that because, when I said earlier how important it is to, have multiple installers come out and really do your homework, that's really that verification that you're doing. And it's so important for big investments like this that, for us, we're planning to burn the mortgage here. We're here long term. We don't want to move around like a lot of people do. And so this was a long-term deal, and we really did need to verify and do our homework. Now, unfortunately, while overall things worked out really, really great, we did have some hiccups that we found out after we installed, that we didn't make it very far into the winter time frame, and our net metering credits ran out quite quickly. And that came as a big surprise, knowing that we paid for a 100% solution. Long story short, there was a math mistake that was made. And I don't want to bash the contractor, because as a homeowner, I didn't really notice the numbers. I didn't read them close enough in the contract. And had I read it a little closer, I think I could have stopped or readjusted at that point. So I do take some responsibility of that. But the other thing is, in terms of asking, I wish I would have asked a lot more questions. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback or have, hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. And that's why sessions like this, I'm so passionate about joining, because I want people to ask the questions. So for me, as a business major, I just was scratching my head a lot watching the install and thinking, man, they could save so much time doing this or that, or doing this differently. Did they get the job done and it turned out great? Absolutely. Did they go over on labor costs? Absolutely. They could have done things so much simpler. And when I said Paul Cusack of West Michigan Solar is really innovative, that's what I'm pointing to. The way in which he does his installs is all about get in there, do it very quickly, very little, issues in terms of, let's not bother the homeowner and be there forever, that kind of thing. That's kind of the difference. Both jobs get done the same way, but there's different paths to get there, and one might be better for you. Get examples of how they're going to do it. Ask lots of questions about how they're going to install, whether it's on your roof or a ground mount. We specifically consciously went with a ground mount. And just ask a lot of those questions. To me, that was probably my biggest lesson learned. I again, overall was really happy with 4 Elements. But when I brought the math mistake or the issue that turned out to be a math mistake to them, there really wasn't any offer to make it right. Not that I expected it financially, but there was no offer to work with me on it. And that was kind of my clue. I wanted to kind of look around. And luckily for me, through the Great Lakes Energy group, being a member and on their Facebook group, I found my way to Paul. And the thing about Paul is he allowed me to consult. I paid him for some consulting, which then allowed me to learn. And I've essentially taken over the maintenance of the entire system. I've added different types of monitoring all the way down to the panel level that allows me to see things. And recently, all of these upgrades allowed me to see voltage spikes on our utility line that no other homeowner on the line was reporting to Consumers Energy. But because my inverters are sophisticated enough to tell me what's going on, I reported it. Long story short, Consumers Energy fixed a transformer issue and a timer issue, solved the problem. They would have never known had I not reported it with our sophisticated monitoring. So I saw that as a big win, and I'm very proud to have a much bigger part in, finishing the system and being able to maintain it on my own. So that's my time. I know I've got to let Dale come in. So thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Josh. And yeah, Dale, what have you learned so far? I know you're in it right now, so you're going to be learning more stuff and hopefully sharing it with us later too.
Yeah. Wordy slide here. I'm just going to say I kind of know some next steps that I mentioned already. You can see there in the middle bullets. Battery storage is of interest to me in the future because of the heat pump, and it'd be nice to have some backup. I've heard other reviews talk about, other types of backup that you've got. And yeah, that becomes more important when you go all electric. And I want to geek out just a little bit on y'all, and the next two slides, look at these graphs of the kind of energy model of my house. So the orange on the bottom here is the Chevy Volt. Then there's the fan on the heat pump, and here's the heating in yellow. So you can see that the heating load becomes the dominant load on the house, the dominant electrical load. The blue here is the summer cooling. And then there's some other miscellaneous loads across the top. So those are the stacks by month of daily kilowatt hour usage with the heat pump. So the heat pump and the car do a lot to the load. And then the light blue line here is my rooftop solar, my new array, kind of a guess at where that's going to be. And then this line is the solar gardens, kind of based on past credits from them. And this line is the consumer's power net metering. And if you go to the next slide, here'd be my ideal situation. Would be a house that were, like I mentioned, the big cargo van that my wife and I have. If that was an EV, then the Volt, then again the heating in yellow here, just like the other one, and then had a big 15 kilowatt array on a roof that was south facing, doing a production line like that with consumers net metering like this. That would be my ideal. And when I think about designing houses for the future, this is the model that I'm currently thinking I want to design to going forward. So that's kind of my lessons learned in a nutshell. So thank you.
Thanks, Dale. And I'm going to continue the graph geek out here for a little bit. But, you know, before I get to that, to give you a little bit of a break on some data, well, you can see it, but you know, I just want to let you all know that this was painful for me to admit several months ago, but I actually don't think net zero is a good idea anymore, which was a hard realization for me to wake up to. But let me explain it to you a little bit. This is my big lesson learned on my project. So here's the reality. You know, we were putting our project together. We were ready to go like somewhere around 7 to 9 kilowatt hours to hit, you know, our definition, right? Remember back to the beginning, what was our definition? Energy consumed equal to energy generated over the course of a year. Well, I don't know about that anymore. And the reason for that is number one, and especially very annoying for me, when the power goes out, it's a huge slap in the face to have your expensive solar be absolutely worthless. It's just a piece of junk sitting on your roof. You can't use it to protect the line workers so you don't fry them. It's a safety issue. So I was like, you know, I lose water when I run out of power, which is double frustrating to have 3 days worth of not being able to use your toilet. So that was number one, is my realization. But getting into this graph here, you know, so this is my Powerwall graph. We obviously, what we decided to do was do way less solar and add a battery instead. And one of the reasons was simply because of the top one there, and then the larger one to your right. You can see here exactly what happens is at some point clouds do cover. It's not as, you know, we're not worried about clouds. It's not too cloudy in Michigan, but you know, clouds will eventually cover the sun, and we still get power even when it's super. I mean, just the other day there was a thick coat of sleet and we got a ton of power still. But it wasn't enough to meet our demand. And so you can see the battery here makes up for that and keeps you off of the grid during high peak times when that cloud coverage comes. So even if you had a ton of solar, if enough cloud coverage came, it may not do anything. The other very important thing on the bottom here, bottom left, is time of use. So you can see what happens here. The sun comes up and starts just cranking away at your home energy, starts building that battery up. That's the green going down. And then you can see all of a sudden 2 o'clock hit when I told Tesla to switch into time of use mode, which I was just testing. I haven't signed yet up for time of use. But basically that means you don't want to pay for power from like whatever, 2 to 7, whatever your peak time is, because you'll get whomped with a huge bill, but you get a super discount during the rest of the time. And so once we sign up for time of use, we want to make sure this is working. So the battery will just feed our house from 2 to 7 after it's been charged all day. And then you can see that huge, massive sort of weird line on the bottom there under the 4 in the bottom left. that's where the solar starts feeding that grid, because the grid needs as much solar as we can to stop those dirty peaker plants, those expensive peaker plants, costing us ratepayer dollars and using a lot of fossil fuels. So we need to do everything we can to stop that. And I would argue to have backup battery systems to protect us as the weather gets more extreme, inevitable outages that are coming, much less the squirrels that continue to fry lines around where I'm at. So that's, taking that, and then to the next thought, if we electrify everything, which is the goal, we're going to have massive peak loads in the wintertime. I mean, my loads are huge, and we're going to put huge loads everywhere. And I think that shouldn't scare you, but it should mean that we can put up 1,000 solar panels on our own personal homes, but it won't really help. We need to work together to advocate, just as Dale said, through the climate lobbyists, or we need to work with Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association to bring up renewable energy capacity, to bring up battery storage so we can run renewably in the wintertime. And that's not something that should be left to us as individuals. We need to work together to do that and to make it happen. So that's where I'm going to be spending my time. That's why I think zero carbon and net zero summer is the way to go. I still want to help people go net zero. I admire them for going net zero, but I challenge it. And so, well, just like Dale did, we're going to be using the Consumers Solar Garden program. If they ever get back to me, I signed up, I haven't heard anything, and get some of our energy from Grand Valley in Western Michigan. And then we need about 8 tons a year. It looks like, we'll see for sure. We're going to get the rest of maybe 5 other tons from renewable energy credits from Bonneville Environmental. With that, it's 1:30, and I just want to make sure that there is time for Q&A. So before we get to that Q&A, again, just reminding you, well, this doesn't mean anything, but just reminding you, for those of you who are watching this right now, take that survey. I'm putting it in the drop-down chat, and then also I'll send it to you in email. If you're taking this course in the future on demand, to get your ComEd, take the quiz. It might be on our Thinkific channel, or it might be on USGBC, wherever you're at. You got to get an 80% passing rate, and then you can get it from there. And before we get into those questions, I just want to say a huge thanks again to our planning partners, Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Association, Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, the Michigan Geothermal Energy Association, Architectural Resource. They've been there, most of them since the start. And then our session sponsors, Mitsubishi Electric, who's been sponsoring this session, this conference from the beginning, as well as Enertech and Water Furnace for Geothermal, and Build Equinox with the SERV, and then DTE and Michigan Saves. Huge thanks to all of their support. All of these folks have great programs and products to help you achieve net zero. So we're actually going to open up the lines now, as long as it doesn't get too chaotic. And we just want to let people, ask their questions in regards to, what they want to know and what they want to learn. There's a lot of questions going on in the chat, but we'd love for you guys to start your video if you'd like, to unmute yourselves.